All right, so here is the next video. We're now going to be talking about how to create a user in Active Directory. So of course, the previous video has gone through a bit of a brief overview around AD. We sort of had a look at Active Directory in its very, very high level and a bit of an overview around OUs and a bit of the purpose of having users and computers and servers, security groups, all of that stuff. Now let's get a little bit more practical and show you how to actually go and create a user. Now, of course, the whole point of having Active Directory in the first place is because you want to manage a pool of users in an organization. So at the moment, this is all empty. Other than this root users folder right here, we've got administrator. There's really nothing else configured. Now, what I generally like to do, as I mentioned before, is create my own hierarchy here around OUs, okay, to make it a little bit easier. I personally don't use these ones right here. I just go and create my own hierarchy to make things a little bit easier to manage. So we're going to start off with, let's say I've got a company and it's called, well, let's say my company is called homedemo.com, because what you generally do is your domain name or your company name would be somehow integrated into the actual domain name that you've selected anyway. So let's say the company's called Home Demo and they've got an office in the USA right here. And we've just gone and created ourselves a USA OU. Let's create another OU. Again, remembering that an OU is really just a folder. That's what we're going to be calling it right here. OU right here. And let's call it Australia. If you can tell from my accent, that's where I'm from. All right, and then within Australia, I'm going to go and create another OU, and I'm going to call it users, and another OU under Australia, and I'm going to go and call it computers. All right, and it could be because USA has got servers, but Australia does not have any servers. So I've only created what's relevant for my groups. So under here, we've got ourselves USA users, and I've created two folders in here called finance and IT. Under Australia, we don't really have too many staff. We've just got, maybe just some administrators. Oops, that's not what we're meant to do. We're meant to go OU, administrators. Now you will notice that there's this option right here called protect container from accidental deletion. Now the reason that is there ticked is, let's say you've got some, in future, you have somebody who maybe accidentally deletes or tries to delete something, or you by yourself try to go and accidentally delete something. If I select administrators, right click and I say delete, are you sure you want to delete? Yes. It's going to tell me you don't have permission to do this because it's protected from accidental deletion. Now I can right click on it and go into properties. Oh wait, I can't actually do anything. Here's a little trick. This is a bit more of an advanced feature. You can go into view and say advanced features. You get access to a few more things in here. We're not going to talk too much about this right now, but I can now go into computers, properties, go into this area right here, object, and you'll see that protect object from accidental deletion, and I can just select that and say okay. And now I can go in and delete that OU, and then I'm going to go back into here and untick advanced features, and I'm back to where I was. So back into here, let's just create it just for now, because we like to have this structure, computers. All right, so we've got Australia, users, administrators. Oh, we created an actual computer. Let's try that again. Computers. Let's delete this one. You're seeing a bit of troubleshooting right in this demo, which is always really, really good. Computers. Okay, so we've now got Australia and we've got the USA. We've got some OUs underneath it. Now, of course, what we want to do is we want to manage all of our users. So all of our staff, the whole point of Active Directory is that all of our staff have an AD account. All of our staff can log into a computer with specific username and password. They then log in, they authenticate against Active Directory, and that's how they really do all work. So all permissions, accessing file servers, accessing printers, accessing servers, whatever it may be, they all do it with all the security and the permissions all controlled and managed within Active Directory. So we really want to have all of our users part of AD. It's a good practice to have. Really, my preference would be no staff member that is going to touch a computer should not have AD. Anybody who's going to touch a computer who needs a login needs to be authenticated via AD. The other good thing about that, of course, is that from a tracking, from an auditing perspective, you know exactly the activity that is taking place because they're logging within AD. You know when they've logged in, you know when they've logged out. You can manage their passwords. You can expire, reset their passwords, their account. You can add, remove permissions to specific areas rather than somebody just having access to everything. That's why we want to use AD, and that's why we want to have users configured. So USA users, let's go ahead and create a new finance person. We're going to right click in here, say new user. Okay. So right clicking just here on the thing, new users. You can also just click on this little icon right here, create a new user in the current container, or just right click new users. Okay. We're going to ask for some specific information. So we've been talking a lot about this John Smith guy. Okay, you'll see that by default, it's grabbing the first name and the last name and putting it under full name, John Smith right here. And what do we want our logon name to be? Okay, now this is how they log in. This is their username. You've heard the term username. This is where you put it in. Now, your company may have its own naming convention around how you want the username to be. It could be your email address. It could be, for example, john.smith. That could be their actual username. Other places could be John Smith with no full stop. Other places could be J Smith. Other places could be John S. Okay, whatever your convention is in your wherever you're working or wherever you're setting this up, just create a good logon name convention and then follow that for any future user. All right, don't have usernames that are just don't make sense. If you're going to pick first name dot surname, stick with that for any future users that you may have joining the organization. Okay, so we're going to say john.smith is our username, and that is john.smith@homedemo.com. Now, this is not an email address. This is just the domain. It's @homedemo.com domain. All right, and that's it. We can put an initial if you so choose to. Next, now we put in the password. Now, this is the password that John Smith is going to be using, right? The very first time John Smith logs in, this is the password that needs to be used. Now, it depends on how you want this configured. Sometimes you could get the user to come out to your desk, put in that password because you don't know it, or you could put in a temporary password in here and confirm it. And then you can have this option ticked here where the user must change password at next logon. I recommend that IT staff should not know users' passwords. Terrible. Just because you're the IT guy doesn't mean that you should know people's passwords. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, it's a privacy issue. But secondly, what if they use that same password at home? What if they use that same password to access their banking details? That's trouble. So the IT person should not know the passwords of individual staff. They should know passwords of administrative things such as servers and network switches and things like that, but not staff members. So I recommend, my preference would be go into here, put in a temporary password. Now we're going to use a temporary password called, we're going to say return @2. So return and then the @ symbol and the number 2. And we're going to select user must change password at next logon. There's some further options in here around user cannot change password ever. So if the user tries to change their password, they can't. That the password never expires. So by default, the passwords will expire after amount of time. You know, the users will get reminders letting them know that a password will expire after 30 days, after 60 days, after 90 days. Then they have to put in a new password. Or you can tick that and say that they never expire. Again, my preference, never tick that. We want users to have their passwords expire. It's good practice. We don't want people using the same password for months and years and years and years. Not good practice. The only reason that I would say a password never expires is sometimes for these service accounts, which we're going to talk about in a future video in a little bit more detail, but that would be the only reason why I would select password never expire. And then account is disabled. So is the account disabled or not? You can have it disabled by default. So you can create the account and then just have it disabled. And then perhaps when the staff member starts, you then enable that account. But we're just going to leave that like this, and user must change password at next login. And then next. Oh, well, it's good if the passwords match. Let's try that again. Okay. Yeah, so that's been created. John Smith. We can now go and right click on John Smith, go into properties, and you can see some further information here. You can go and add some additional information, which is sometimes good to do. Add his description, add a telephone number, email address, web page. Under address, some further information. So this is actually a great spot to even store some of this information. Something that I've seen and it can be helpful. So a lot of organizations use SharePoint, for example, and they have a nice intranet page where staff information is in there, and you can go and see staff photos and understand what they do, etc., etc. You could actually integrate that with AD and then pull some of this information and automatically post it into SharePoint. Of course, you wouldn't be posting publicly, people's addresses, but you can spit out any of this information into SharePoint or something similar. Account. Here's a bit more information. You've got now john.smith at home demo. Right from here, you'll see that there's some account options. This is what we ticked earlier, which is user must change password at next logon, and nothing else is ticked, okay? And that is really the basics of the users. You can go into a lot more detail in a future video, but that is the basics on how to create a user and a little bit of an overview around OUs as well.